And this won't change with our current political leaders. They're both singing the same playbook of the Federal Reserve: low rates, a weak dollar, more debt, more inflation. And ultimately, this has to end in some form of a new system, some form of a reset. I even think Trump understands that perhaps better than the rest. Even Vance, his running mate, says, maybe being the world reserve currency isn't such a great idea. So where does that lead us? Well, you look at the West. Kristalina Georgieva, the head of the IMF, has talked about gold as no longer being a barbarous relic, as being something that would be akin to a world reserve currency, in a report that they wrote last year called the Gold as an International Reserve, a barbarous relic no more, ? Or her statement recently that a CBDC pegged to something that isn't pegged to something is just fiat. And if we look at what is proposed and agreed upon in principle, according to Delma Rousseff, which we'll find out real soon. First, to your point, it is much like World War II. At the end of World War II, the dollar took over for the pound sterling as the world reserve currency, and it was backed by gold. The dollar was, where countries could exchange their dollars for a fixed rate of gold at $35 an ounce. And that ended when Nixon closed the gold window in 1971. And then the agreement that we had with the Saudis to value oil globally in dollars and to reinvest the excess into U.S. treasuries, called the dollar recycling. Well, you could argue that ended a few months ago when the Saudis said, listen, we're not going to sell oil exclusively in dollars anymore. We'll still take them, but we're open to taking other currencies. And now we're in this Bretton Woods III sort of phase, if we call loosely the petrodollar being Bretton Woods II, where it's about, I would agree with you, a marriage of commodities and transparency. That would be blockchain. And I think that is a very obvious place to draw the parallel between here and at the end of World War II. It seems that we are very close to crossing over this global Rubicon, a new system, a system that is one that has more faith and confidence, because this is a system that used to be backed by gold, and now it is a system backed by nothing but the faith and the confidence and the credit.
To sustain dollar dominance, the U.S. struck a deal with Saudi Arabia. Oil trade would be priced in dollars, and surplus petrodollars would flow back into U.S. treasuries. This dollar recycling bolstered U.S. credit and reinforced the dollar's global role. But that pact now seems under strain. Saudi Arabia has signaled openness to accepting alternate currencies. The petrodollar era looks vulnerable to replacement. We may be transitioning to a Bretton Woods III era, where commodities and digital transparency merge via blockchain rather than relying solely on raw fiat.
Of a country that is insolvent, we're at 123% debt to GDP. There's never been a country that's really come back from this level without hyperinflating or defaulting. We're a country that's lost much of our faith and our good graces with our foreign creditors around the world, whether it be through weaponization of the treasury market, from a country that is, by many people's estimation around the globe, tyrannical and hypocritical. And of course, all of the craziness that we see here at home surrounding elections and the immigration system, the judicial system, the wokeness, the lawlessness in the big cities, all of this stuff is not lost on the rest of the world. So I would agree with you, first and foremost, that we are very ripe for a reset. We are ripe for some sort of a change. We are a country, when we talk about trust, we're creating $100,000 in debt per second. And that's $1 trillion every 3 months. It took 200 years to do it the first time. The trust, the faith, the confidence, the credit, all of these things have been severely compromised. And that's a nice way of saying it. And so, yes, I do agree that when you piss in the punch bowl enough, no one's going to drink that punch bowl out of that punch bowl ever again until we can re-inspire confidence and trust and legitimacy. And this is where you find a marriage between the transparency of blockchain, the immutability of blockchain, with a hard asset like gold. And when you realize, to your point, that the central banks are behind this.
Today's monetary order rests entirely on confidence, faith in governments, in debt markets, in institutions. But when a country carries debt exceeding 100% of GDP, historical precedent suggests hyperinflation or default often follow. The United States, with its internal controversies and geopolitical misgivings, has strained its credibility abroad. At home, political dysfunction, inflation, and social unrest have eroded investor and citizen trust alike. Once you spoil the punch bowl, it's hard to get people back to drinking. Restoring faith, a renewed sense of legitimacy, may demand a complete structural reset.
Well, you have the Bank of International Settlements that seems to be all over the place, whether it be reclassifying gold as a tier one asset or also standing behind Project Enbridge, which is the new cross-border payment system that the BRICS have adopted that will allow countries to trade their central bank digital currencies back and forth with one another, including the proposed new unit settlement currency, which was agreed to in principle, according to Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil, and the head of the BRICS New Development Bank. All of this stuff will become much more clear over the next 2.5, 3 weeks as we get to this meeting at the end of the month in Russia. But yes, I agree with everything you just said wholeheartedly. We are close to some form of a change, of a reset. And that's not really, I think, that far-fetched any longer when you look at what's happening to monetary policy across the globe. I mean, whether any of the G7 countries are drowning in debt, and they all are suffering the same fate, it seems, with immigration, with money creation, with the problems that have to be addressed by suppressing interest rates for so long. We've created distortions and misallocations of capital and resources that we've gone too far past the ability, I believe, to fix without taking some sort of a massive step, some sort of a reset, some sort of a change. And
the emerging vision blends the unforgeable transparency of blockchain with the hard asset backing of gold. Central institutions like the BIS are repositioning gold as a Tier 1 asset and backing novel cross-border systems like Project Enbridge, now evolving toward full handover. In parallel, BRICS countries are exploring a new settlement token, or unit, partly gold-backed and tradable across national digital ledgers. This hybrid model could replace trust in governments with trust in code and commodity value. The question, can this architecture anchor a new monetary regime?
And this won't change with our current political leaders. They're both singing the same playbook of the Federal Reserve: low rates, a weak dollar, more debt, more inflation. And ultimately, this has to end in some form of a new system, some form of a reset. I even think Trump understands that perhaps better than the rest. Even Vance, his running mate, says, maybe being the world reserve currency isn't such a great idea. So where does that lead us? Well, you look at the West. Kristalina Georgieva, the head of the IMF, has talked about gold as no longer being a barbarous relic, as being something that would be akin to a world reserve currency, in a report that they wrote last year called Gold as an International Reserve, a barbarous relic no more, ? Or her statement recently that a CBDC pegged to something that isn't pegged to something is just fiat. And if we look at what is proposed and agreed upon in principle, according to Dilma Rousseff, which we'll find out real soon, the BRICS settlement currency, the unit, is 40% gold backed, deliverable upon demand, and traded over Project Enbridge, a marriage of commodities a la gold, which is what? The only other tier one asset as redefined by who? The BIS, who is also behind Project Enbridge. Project Enbridge has the 4 countries, China, Hong Kong, Thailand, UAE. They're the ones who developed it. Well, the 5th country, who is now a full participant, none other than Saudi Arabia. And, dollars are not compatible with this new system. So indeed, we are this close to a new system, whether it's announced in the next 3 weeks or not. It's happening.
Concrete moves are already underway. Central banks, especially across BRICS, have been accumulating gold aggressively, now holding over 6,000 metric tons, 20% of global reserves. The U.S. Treasury's gold reserves, long undervalued on its books, recently crossed $1 trillion in market terms, reigniting debate over revaluation. Meanwhile, BRICS are pushing de-dollarization strategies, deploying alternate payment rails, and reviewing proposals for a new reserve unit backed partly by gold and digital architecture. These aren't hypothetical designs, they are protocols being tested now.
If you take the world's GDP and look at the countries that comprise the world's GDP, 99% of those countries have a central bank digital currency in development and or operation. Here in the United States, Lael Brainerd, the number two economic policymaker to the White House, modern monetary theorist, worked at the Treasury, was number two under Powell at the Fed. She's now advising Biden. She developed the CBDC while working at the Boston Fed with MIT. When Biden fast-tracked its development by executive orders. So all of these things that you just said very succinctly, much more so than I can, are true, and they are happening. The question is, what does it look like? How does it play out? Does the West beat the world to the punch by revaluing gold, by revaluing it to a level that would reliquify the Treasury, allow us to pay off our debts? You see, every $4,000 increase in the price of gold would add $1 trillion free and clear to the Treasury for them to do with what they want. Janet Yellen doesn't even need congressional approval to revalue the price of gold. She'll just instruct Jerome Powell to do it. It's been done before over my shoulder. That's exactly what Roosevelt did. He confiscated gold, devalued the dollar by 40%, made gold worth 40% more, reliquified the system. And when you have Senator Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming saying we should revalue the gold that is being held by the Federal Reserve on behalf of the Treasury to fund a strategic Bitcoin account, which Trump says he would like to do and use the growth in that to pay off our debt. How far away are we from this realization? The same thing is being said by the head of the Dutch National Bank, who is saying, yes, we should revalue the gold that we hold in order to offset our liabilities. My belief, 100%, and I think you nailed it, is that all of the central banks are buying gold at a level the world has never seen before, ever. And they're every single month they're setting new records in acquisition. The first 6 months of this year, the biggest ever, only outpacing the first 6 months of last year.
A global monetary reboot now seems less speculative and more inevitable. The old pattern, more debt, weaker dollar, endless central bank interventions, may be reaching its breaking point. Whether or not the new system fully unveils itself in the next few weeks, the momentum is unmistakable. The central question is, who leads it? Will the West reprice its gold reserves and claim the narrative, or will a new multipolar regime built by BRICS and allies assume primacy? In either case, gold's rise and blockchain's code are likely to anchor the next monetary order.
And I do believe that all of these central banks who are not only massively accumulating gold and have been for several years, quietly, privately, opaquely, are also repatriating their gold, bringing it home, because the doctrine, the white paper on the unit, says that the gold that will be used to comprise the new unit tokens will be held within the borders of the countries that possess it, eliminating another problem. And that is the unipolarity of it, where here everything has to be held at the New York Fed or the Bank of England to access the COMEX and the LBMA, and you have to trust the West. Venezuela said, give us back our gold. Nah, we don't want to do it, said the Bank of England. That's a problem. They are addressing the problems inherent with this unipolar system, moving towards a multipolar system where countries trade with one another over Enbridge, free from the SWIFT interference, using the integrity that will be built up in their own ecosystem and their own monetary policy. But if they want to settle in something different, if they have enough digital yuan or rupee or real or whatever currency that they're using over Enbridge, they can take the settlement token, which will be gold-backed and deliverable upon request. This is a new system. It is one where gold will go higher than anyone thinks possible, because it will be used to not only reset the system or revalue the price of gold and reliquify these treasuries, which are massively in debt across the whole G7 universe, and it will also be used to back a new system where instead of making it redeemable for you and me, like you could in 33 and walk in with a $20 gold certificate and get a coin, it will just be immutable and be able to see the veracity of it, to guarantee that the politicians have some sort of a tether to reality, to fiscal responsibility. The ability to possess it, probably not. But indeed, I think we are moving in that direction, a system that will be backed by blockchain and using some sort of a commodity-backed system like gold, which is the only other tier one asset, tied to it to guarantee that no one pisses in that punch bowl again by inflating away the system the way that all politicians have done since the beginning of time.